I'm David Swansbuckle.
And I am Warren Spector.
Yeah, well, that's the abandonment of the welfare state, isn't it?
Yeah.
Greedy fat cats. Yeah.
Smug.
Yeah. Okay, welcome to the Metropolitan Elites, episode 2.
Yeah. So, what's your thing of the week?
Wow, we've got a lot to choose from. Obviously, today we've had the news that Greece is just saying, "Screw you, I ain't paying you a penny." That's quite important, actually. But for me, the week is George Osborne is restarting his Spivery program and making up numbers.
Yes, indeed.
I quite like that. What about you, Kev?
It's very entertaining, isn't it, when he makes up numbers? Well, the big thing for me this week is about Prince Charles, and I know it was kind of laughed at a bit that the Guardian made such a big effort to get these letters published, and they turned out to be a bit dull, actually. But what's in the Guardian today, and therefore the truth, he's been lobbying for homeopathy, basically to be a big part of the NHS, which I think is horrendous. He's supposed to be this figurehead, and whatever he's supposed to be. I mean, I'm not a royalist, but you can see how the Queen has done a good job in that you don't really know her opinions. I mean, last week we talked about when she sighed slightly, and that might well be sign of an opinion. It means that she's done a fantastic job, and obviously Prince Charles is a different kettle of fish completely. And I think I used to think, well, what does it matter? But when he's lobbying for evil anti-science stuff, the real nasty pseudoscience stuff that gets in the way of people's safety in the end, I think it's horrendous. The thing he said was with reference to the medical and scientific establishments, capital letters, like it's an organisation. So Prince Charles, right, has a complex, has paranoia about an elite.
Yeah.
Prince Charles, the ordinary working man, is complaining about the elites.
Interestingly enough, I was reading Steve Hilton's book's come out. It's called Too Human or something like that, and he has a dig at the establishment as well. He has a thing about big business and the establishment not treating people like human beings, and he really wants, he really sees small as beautiful. It's really interesting. You read the first few chapters, and he reads like a Guardian columnist. Mm-hmm. Or even worse than that, an independent. He's really sort of, you would say this guy is
anti-authoritarian.
Yeah, he's a liberal. This guy's a liberal, and yet he was the ideas guy for Cameron for a couple of years until he couldn't handle it anymore, and then buggered off. But I mean, it's really interesting that it seems to be a pervasive feeling of an establishment which are trying to rail against you and stop you accomplishing what seems reasonable. But if you want a good book on the establishment, obviously our favourite columnist and TV personality Owen Jones wrote a book on the establishment, and he seems to be the only guy who's actually tried to come up with a concrete definition of what the establishment are and how it operates.
Yeah, well, obviously most people doing this kind of thing don't want to do that.
The establishment seems to be the shadowy figures that are stopping you doing what's reasonable, and therefore everyone has an experience of the establishment, even Prince Charles. Yeah. And if that does sort of make your blood boil a little bit, just Google Jeremy Hunt and homeopathy and see what comes up.
Yes, yeah, that too. But I have to say, Andy Burnham was eager to encourage this stuff as well, so him too, which means I will never vote for him.
He's just a Labour stooge.
Yeah, and he said something that sounds politically good to say.
Yeah, and who also jumped on the FIFA bandwagon.
Yes.
Towards the end of last week. That's the other big news, isn't it?
Yeah.
The witch hunt has come to an end. We've got our witch, and we're in the middle of drowning her, although she's refusing to drown quite so as gracefully as we would like. But it feels like finally we might get a week next week without talk of the bleeding obvious. We all knew FIFA was corrupt.
Yeah, but it only counts if it's corrupt against us.
For some reason, the establishment have really got worked up about this. Everyone who follows football knows that FIFA was corrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, the last World Cup bid we made wasn't the only World Cup bid we'd lost.
Oh.
We'd lost one to Germany previously. We wanted to hold the World Cup when Germany did.
But mysteriously that was alright.
And no one's saying that the Germans offered Sepp Blatter a bung. And yet they're saying his premiership has been riddled with corruption. Which I actually don't doubt that much. But what I really don't understand is why politicians are actually caring at the moment about this. And I strongly suspect it's because we did roll out Prince William the last bit, and we're so upset that we unleashed a royal on these bastards, and they didn't give us the bid. The
disrespect to our royals.
Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Okay, yeah. So another piece in the news is this 10% pay rise where David Cameron and a lot of the Shadow Cabinet are saying this is out of order, and the Shadow Cabinet are basically saying they're going to give 10% rise to charity. But there does seem to be there was a guy on Radio 4 who was like a Tory backbencher. I can't remember his name. I only caught it sort of mid-interview, and he sounded pretty desperate actually. I mean, the guy's on £75,000, but what he was saying is he doesn't have a flat in London. He stops in a hotel for the nights he needs to be in a hotel. He gets £150 a night allowance for that, and there aren't many hotels in London left, or rooms left in London that charge £150, so he has to subsidise it with an extra £50 a night, so essentially £200 a night. And an MP earns £94 a day, so essentially you take £50 out of that because you're subsidising your living arrangements, and you're not left with a lot. And he also went on to the point that he voted for boundary reform, and that he's effectively making himself redundant because his is one of the constituencies that will go. He's got integrity. He's voting for what he thinks is right, not what will benefit him. But on the issue of pay, it is very difficult to get by in London on an MP salary, a backbench MP salary of 75 grand plus expenses. And therefore the 10% rise is definitely needed. The point is that public sector have had a pay freeze for God knows how many years now.
Yeah.
And everyone is feeling that pinch. Everyone in real world is feeling that pinch and struggling and having to make serious budgetary decisions. Politicians do seem to subscribe to this idea of the meritocracy, that they are where they are because they deserve it, because they're extra special, and therefore they should be earning at least north of £200,000 a year, and that they're doing something very special by giving up that opportunity to become an MP. And I still think, even though that MP sounded genuine and sounded quite distraught, I just don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's pie in the sky for us, isn't it? 75 grand.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Do you remember that pop star woman?
Marlene Klass,
yeah. Of course,
mansion tax.
Ed Miliband being completely useless, let her walk all over him, and it was appalling. She was saying, "You can't live on £1 million house." £1 million house.
Sol Campbell was the other one who was being, they were talking, charging him a few extra grand on a £25 million house. It's complete hypocrisy. There is a definite disconnect between what seems to be very wealthy people and the reality of the majority of people.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, she was completely delusional. Obviously, by definition, she hasn't. She's someone who, well, she may well work very hard, but that's not the point, is it? I mean, by definition, she got there through a reality TV program.
×2.
Which means, she literally jumped the queue to get there, and now she's complaining that, they're going to tax my £1 million house.
It's ridiculous. You can't just point at things and tax them. Well, yeah, that's what tax is.
Yeah. So our final thing for this episode is a biggie. We don't really do levity very well, so bear with us on this, but we have to talk about Charles Kennedy. Fantastic politician. One of my favourite politicians, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it's obviously very sad. The thing I remember is about the fact what he did for the Liberal Democrats, and it was all about they were expanding so much down to him. I mean, Paddy Ashdown as well.
Paddy Ashdown was plugging away for years.
Yeah.
And there was still a marginal party. Charles Kennedy came in, and I don't know when he was elected, it was a kind of who? And after he was elected, and a few appearances, question time, whatever, it actually turned out he was a very reasonable,
and
very relatable.
That rare combination of being really natural and relatable and good on TV and all that, and actually having content behind it as well.
Yeah.
Of stuff he actually believed, the general stuff I believe, certainly, Yeah. And obviously he led Liberal Democrats in opposing the Iraq War when Ian Duncan Smith saying, I've read this secret dossier, and yes, I agree, definitely we need to go in, but we can't tell you what's in it. He led the charge opposing that, and everybody knows he was right.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, tinfoil hat on, but I remember at the time when they got rid of him that the Lib Dems are making waves now, they need to replace him with an empty suit. And it's literally what happened. So
actually, that's not true. Mingus Campbell wasn't an empty suit.
No, but he wasn't the big figure of Charles Kennedy. It seemed like they had to get rid of him because they were being successful and because he would have made waves.
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
and in the end, who he was replaced with in the end was very much our greatest fear.
We had the empty suit, the sort of one afterwards. Mingus Campbell was relieved of his position under somewhat questionable circumstances. Why it was a sort of age thing. Again, another man of principle, not as relatable as Charles Kennedy, but when he spoke, you listened to him. And I think having two leaders like that, and to a certain extent Paddy Ashdown, sort of gave the Liberal Democrats a certain weight in the Commons. They were principled people fundamentally, and they were doing what they were doing because they thought it was right,
and they
were willing to make the argument for it.
Yeah, and that's why they were getting votes, and that's why they didn't get votes later on.
And it turns out that kind of politician isn't going to get the majority of the votes in this country, as we found out at the last general election, because as we now know, principles count for nothing in politics.
Well, I mean, it does seem people voted on fear.
Yeah.
Fear of the economy, etc., and you can pick that apart and whatever, but a lot of people were surprised. Obviously not the people who voted Tory, which is a lot of people.
It's a hard thing to have principles in politics, and Charles Kennedy managed to pull it off and be quite successful in his time. His lasting legacy on the Liberal Democrats has been wiped out by Nick Clegg now, which is a terrible tragedy, which adds more to the tragedy. Obviously there was a series of tragedies in Charles Kennedy's life, including the breakup of his family and the death of his father. You can understand sort of why he was struggling to come to terms with what it was. I actually watched that episode of Question Time when he...
I didn't see it.
Yeah, and I said to you sort of the day after, I said, Charles Kennedy didn't look right.
And it turned out he wasn't drunk. That wasn't what he was.
But there you go. It's a sad day. To see one of the good ones go again. Yeah, so we've told you what to think this week. Tune in next week when we'll tell you what else to think.
Yeah. Everything else is wrong except it was all about the EU.
Yeah.
So we were obviously wrong, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, we'll be back next week. The Illuminati will ring us up once again.
Yeah, our lizard overlords will tell us what to say.
Yeah. See you then.
Please subscribe and give us some thumbs up and some thumbs down. We've got some of them this week.
Yeah, the thumbs down are good. We like the thumbs down.